So let me start this panel discussion by posing Kerban, Rajdeo, a question on how can government help lower the extra cost of green hydrogen so it can compete better with fossil fuels.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. And it's really a pleasure to be here and with all the fellow panelists. I think just three broad points on that question. So far, in the National Green Hydrogen Mission, there's been a very targeted and warranted need to focus on supply and manufacturing. I think now, as we are seeing it, demand needs to play a much stronger role. In the sense of hydrogen purchase agreements, offtake agreements, which really have a much longer term commitment. While we have seen a lot of success in that in terms of the SECI tenders for the fertilizer industry, there can be a lot more aggressive focus on the demand side just to be able to create that revenue pathway for these large projects in the future. I think the second point, which is also interesting, is one where the government can focus on looking at shared infrastructure for such projects. I think currently we're looking at them just as standalone manufacturing projects, but we really need to look at them as large critical infrastructure, similar to how we would look at an airport or a port, and figure out ways in which the infrastructure around these projects can be made usable and much more efficient. And we've seen these examples in the hydrogen valleys concept in the European Union. We also have elements of this in our own policy through the hydrogen hubs. But I think focusing a little bit more on this can definitely make these projects more cost efficient in the long term. And one final point, I think, is also looking at some of the ancillary policies that may impact the mission. So, for example, our carbon markets, how far have they developed and how far are they going to impact the hydrogen industry? CBAM and its implications for some of our steel and other manufacturing facilities. And then also, if you look at transmission and other various sort of ancillary policies that can have a much more long-term impact on this segment. So I think these three areas, if there's a little bit more long-term vision and focus, I think it's definitely going to be beneficial for the industry.
Thank you, ma'am. Samir ji, we haven't seen many projects coming up in a big way. Though we are seeing long-term offtake agreements being signed, but when do we see banks financing these projects, at least 5-6 of them, the bigger ones, so that the investor gets a confidence that we can that this is bankable? What's your thoughts, sir?
Sure. No, thank you, Pravin. Very pertinent question in current time. I think that the banks they do not hesitate in doing the lending. There is enough capital available in the market. I think they are and they have a full trust on the future of the green hydrogen and the derivatives. But I think they are still trying to understand, when the developer is spending billions of dollars and banks are partnering with the developers, they want to really see how the cash flow they are going to generate. If you talk about the solar and the wind, they have experience of decades and they never see a challenge in lending money to the developers. But when it comes to the hydrogen business, there are many moving parts. Just for an example, the hydrogen business or the hydrogen manufacturing, it has a lot of dependence on the renewable energy, the battery, the electrolyzer, which is an evolving technology, the purification of hydrogen, for example, compression, transmission, transportation. And if you talk about the derivatives, these technologies are existing for a decade, but nobody has seen its integration with the electrolyzers, which operates on a variable energy. So there are many moving parts which always create some sort of confusion in the minds of banks, and they want to get certain that the lending they are going to do it ultimately comes back to them as the time passes by. Apart from that, there are several risks they see. One risk is the technological risk wherein the electrolyzer, which is a evolving technology, and every day you hear that there is some improvement happening in the efficiency or the cost is coming down, is still the level of confidence is not as much in the minds of the bankers. Second is the market uncertainty. Today, when the offtake is being talked about, the off-taker mostly look for a very short span of offtake. They talk about 5 years, 10 years. When you are building a project and spending billion of dollars, developing those projects, offtake for a very short duration put a lot of risk to the developer as well as the banks. So this is another thing wherein, at one end, off-taker wants to play a safe situation, keeping future developments in mind and keep the off-take period much shorter. It is a huge risk for the developers and the banks. Similarly, on the regulatory side, we keep hearing there are different bodies, they keep coming up with different kind of regulations, lot of incentives which vary from one state to other state. There is also uncertainty, the kind of benefits, the subsidies which are coming up, whether they will still be applicable for next 25 years or they will be withdrawn as the time passes by. That also brings in some uncertainty in the minds of the bank. So I believe that, it is a industry which is still at a less maturity level. I think with time, we have to strengthen our policies. There has to be a technological development to give the confidence to the developers and the banks. And at the same time, manufacturing at a scale which can give more confidence and bring down the cost of the investment or the capex investment. I think these are the major reasons because of which banks are little hesitant, but I see as the time passes by, these hurdles will, get rid of.
Any time frame to it, sir?
I think there is a lot of momentum in the market. You see the recent, the tenders which came, and there were a number of winners. There were refinery tenders. So I think these tenders with a lot of support from the government will bring confidence in the mind of bankers to do the lending. So I think as these projects which are now at a very native stage, they get mature, I believe that it will build more confidence in them, and they will be, more aggressive in terms of doing the lending.
And sir, where is your company in this overall big picture of mega plants?
Sure. So just a brief background and then talk about the, our ambitions in the green molecule business. We are one of the largest renewable energy company. And we see that our presence in India in renewable energy in last 15 years, it has been exponential growth. And there is a fantastic synergy between the green electrons experience we have with the green molecules. With that in mind, we started working on green molecule business about 4 years back. And since then, we have made significant progress. We have one green ammonia project of 300 KTA or 900 TPD in Paradeep in the state of Odisha. And you all know that, the Odisha is a state which is giving the best incentives to promote the green business in the state. That project is currently in pre-engineering stage, and we expect FID maybe in first quarter next year. And as we get closer to the FID, I think work at the ground will start. Apart from green ammonia, we have interest in developing the green methanol projects. There is a growing demand of methanol, both in bunkering or the shipping industry, as well as in the aviation industry, where methanol can be converted into jet. So methanol is another molecule where we have a strong focus, and parallelly we are developing a green methanol project as well.
And we are also seeing ports coming up with a lot of incentive scheme on setting up joint ventures with them, whether it is the Tuticorin or whether it is Kandla. So you are also participating in few of them. So how do you see ports coming up as a big hydrogen hub in future in India?
Yeah. So I think it is not just the port. The entire infrastructure, development is essential for the success of the green molecule. More from the export perspective. So government is taking fantastic steps in terms of developing green ports and the green shipping corridors, in collaboration with many foreign companies. And these are the sort of enablers for promoting the green molecule to deploy not only in domestic market but also in the foreign markets. So port become very essential part of it. So when I'm talking about my Paradip project, the Paradip port is just 15 kilometers away from our site, and we see that the kind of development which is happening at the Paradip port, it will be a great help in exporting it to the Europe and the Southeast Asian countries like Japan and Korea. Similarly, in the Gopalpur also, the government is coming up with the port infrastructure, the common enablers such as, the storage facilities, the pipeline from the places where most of the developers are putting up their new projects. So I think the efforts the government is making in developing the ports, surely is a great help to the developers like us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Deepak ji, we are seeing mega projects like NTPC, which is planning a massive 20 gigawatt hub in Udimmadaka, which is requiring a staggering capital. How can we better aggregate long-term domestic and international capital to de-risk these investments? And since you come from the financial community, you are a better person in this panel to answer this.
Thanks. And I would just add to what my fellow speakers were saying. So I think banks and financial institutions want to completely ensure that the money that they give to any developer gets paid back with assured principal repayment as well as interest. That's their limited objective. And whether it's any form of infrastructure that you do, when the solar was at any infancy 15, 18 years back, or when the roads were getting concessioned out, or when the ports were projects getting awarded. So it's a typical non-recourse project financing structures that sails through both in India as well as international markets. So idea is to how do you de-risk the project of this magnitude, which involves a full integrated component of renewable energy across solar and wind. There would be some storage element, and the complexity in the storage is through the battery energy system. Some PSP may take off in 3 to 5 year time frame, and also the hydrogen storage. And then you have the entire molecule production value chain through hydrogen, ammonia, and then the storage. So how do you de-risk the entire value chain is what's the biggest concern, and what's you need to, as a developer, we need to solve for. Banks are typically comes much later in the picture, because you cannot approach to the banks unless you yourself are sure whether the sponsor's money is itself protected or not. And as Samir ji referred to, there are so many risks that are involved in this relatively new and a sunrise sector. All the stakeholders have to come together and have to address each and every point in this entire value chain to make it successful. I think the biggest thing that we see in the last 4-5 years of development is the support that is needed from the demand side perspective. Because unless we solve the demand side equation through a very strong intervention by governments, through policy intervention, to giving them direct subsidies and incentives to move them, transition to a greener economy, whatever the suppliers and the producers do, everything will just remain on paper. So ultimately, it's the customers who have to drive, and they have to be incentivized and equally disincentivized to continue to emit carbon. So there should be proper carbon footprint prices in place, like a European ETS system, which is, though there is ETS do exist in several other countries like Korea, like UK, China and all, but there the maturity of the market is very low, volumes are quite low. So still there is not a very strong deterrent, in place to ensure that the carbon footprint come down. So the idea is there should be a lot of demand side intervention is needed. Once the demand side equation is taken care of, I think there are enough entrepreneurs in India who will solve for all the problems that are involved in producing the molecule, which is essentially a commodity. And that's the reason when the players like NTPC that you mentioned, or even Renew, or even Avaada, we are developing a large project along the east coast of India of 500,000 ton green ammonia. Since it's a commodity, scale matters. And scale will help you bring down the lowest cost per production. So this is not a game for small size projects. You have to go for scale, and for that, with that scale comes the economies of scale benefit. Will ensure that the molecule can be as lowest quartile as possible, if not the lowest, in comparison to, let's say, other competing markets like China, Chile, Brazil, and Australia. So the international customers who are seeing, whether it's in East Asia or the Europe, for them, the producing countries are this 5-6. Now, amongst these 5-6 countries, how does India maintain its competitiveness? And within India, whether it's East Coast, whether it's West Coast, which part of India is offering better incentives, entrepreneurs and go and set up their projects there. So the idea is to ensure that there is a proper project risk reward mechanism in place. Whatever risk you can identify in being a sunrise sector, address that, minimize it, and ensure that all the contracts are in place, just like any other infrastructure sector in India. And then once that thing is taken care of, I think there is enough capital available both in Indian markets as well as international markets. So I don't see capital as a constraint, both from an equity perspective as well as from a debt perspective. It's ultimately a project should be very sound, economical, stand its own standalone basis in terms of the cash flow generation. If that thing is taken care of, the sponsors are willing to commit large pool of equity capital, and banks and financial institutions will follow.
So the demand will come from outside India or within India?
So I think both the tracks are working. I think in India, SECI did a fantastic job last year. So that was the first largest greener fertilizer tender anywhere in the world, and they could manage to close it successfully. Now, time will tell how many projects finally get executed, but at least they took care of that demand and came out with the first tender. SECI recently came out with another green methanol tender, which we are watching very closely. But yeah, so demand has to come from both domestic as well as international markets. International markets, very select countries are actually sticking to their net zero commitment. So because even the customers in those respective countries are dependent on their government, whether they are subsidizing their energy transition to lower carbon molecules. So there are too many moving parts in the entire value chain. But yeah, I don't think we can afford to focus on one market versus another. It has to be a multi-pronged strategy, whether it's domestic, whether it's Asia, whether it's Europe, and also from an industry perspective, because something, let's say, Korea, who has taken power utility as the use case, Japan is taken both power utility as well as industry. And likewise, Singapore, they started with the maritime decarbonization. And so idea is there are early adopters, just like any other industry. Here we are seeing there are some early adopters, but they're depending on the market and the geography, and depending on the industry, you have to be pick and choose your marketing strategy and accordingly drive those efforts.
Sir, any timelines? Do you see 2028 big plants coming up?
So of course, the one who have already signed the offtake agreements, I'm sure they would be in their process of getting FIDs and move to the construction phase. So I'm not sure about 2028, but since they would have already committed their COD when they are signing the offtake, so maybe 2029 we should see some early signs. But Yes, for us, we are very clear that the firm offtake has to be placed and it has to be on a long tenor. And as Samirji mentioned, 5 to 10 year doesn't work, and it needs to be as long as possible. In fact, ammonia plants have a much longer life than a renewable energy plant. It can easily run for 40, 50 years. So idea is the longer the tenure of the project, the better is its economics and better is the ability to raise a long-term capital. And by virtue of this, the longer the pool of capital available, the lower will be the cost of production. So I would suggest that, maybe 28 looks a little tight, but 2029 we could see some early set of projects start coming in.
But we haven't seen such long offtake agreements being signed. It is either 5 years or 7 years. But is it the same globally also, or there people have signed 20 years or 40 years agreement?
So there is a mix. So as far as India is concerned, the SECI says initially SECI has came out with 10-year tenders, but there are several markets in the world. They have moved to 15 years, and even now there are some pockets, and especially driven by this recent West Asian crisis, some customers have come back. They are willing to look at 15 plus 5 years. So yes, now there is a serious thing that if it were to happen, it has to be at least 10 to 15 year bracket. I don't think just 10 years would move the needle too much,
Thank you, sir. Samir ji, if you can dwell upon EU regulations demand strict additionality with and temporal geographic correlation for exported green hydrogen. What steps must India's regulatory bodies take to quickly align national standard with this global criteria? Presently, the standards are not aligned with the European standards. So, of the green hydrogen that we are talking about. So, what is the progress on that front?
Yeah. So, the European Union brought up certain regulations, very commonly known as RFMBO, which talks about additionality, temporal correlation, and the geographical correlations. They have been built very thoughtfully, keeping in mind that the molecule, the green molecule, which is produced and supplied to the European Union, it is a very genuine green molecule. These correlations and these requirements basically ensure that the renewable energy projects which support the green molecule, they should be from the grassroots. It is not that the existing renewable powers are diverted here, right? This is one. Second is there is a very robust, the power management requirement as a part of temporal correlation, wherein they want to ensure that any green electron which is produced goes for the hydrogen production, and there is no mismatch in terms of using a gray power. Geographical correlation is basically has become a bit of challenge, because when these RFMBO rules were prepared, probably Europe was kept in mind, wherein they see that every country, region, they have different grids, different pricing structure, and in order to mitigate that challenge, they came up with a geographical correlation, whereas in India we have a single grid all through. And there is no such variation which exists, but European Union is not in a position to respect the kind of single grid we have, and they still say and treat it not as a single grid or the bidding zone. India tried to split the whole nation into different parts to, to support our FMBA requirement, but to my knowledge, still it has not worked out, and which is posing a lot of challenges to the developers. So these rules which have been prepared in Europe, they are highly European centric, and there has been a lot of regulatory advisory, government to government level discussions happened, to resolve this issue, because it is a fact and it is very much known in the European nation also that India is a country which produces the green molecule at the least cost because of the plenty of renewable energy available at a much cheaper rate. So those discussions are still taking place, but it has not reached to a conclusion. Now, to further mitigate this, I believe India has to step up in terms of certification, developing a national certification policy, which is very much aligned with the RFMBO rules, so that, any developer who has that certificate, can well recognized by the European entities without doing too much of the investigation within the system. I think having such a standard certification policy would help a lot developers in making their product easily saleable in the Europe. Apart from that, India needs to step up in terms of doing some digital innovation in terms of accounting of the power, wherein it can be established that the green molecule which is produced is being directly used for the production of the green hydrogen, and there is no lapses in between where the gray molecule can get into. So they basically a digital accounting system, if it is developed, probably it can also help in. So I foresee that these kind of a few steps can surely help us mitigating the kind of challenges which we developers are facing in India because of the RFMBO.
Thank you, sir. Bharati ma'am, you have been playing a pioneering role in development of electrolyzer in your company, HPCL. My question to you is, are we ready to manufacture advanced electrolyzers of a massive scale? Because presently, the refinery projects are pretty small in nature, and those are based on build, operate, boom model is what you are talking about. So where do we go so that these mega plants can be set up and we move at a faster pace?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pravin. Good evening to all my panelists and the audience. I feel this question is like a need of the hour. If we talk about the manufacturing section, India has a strong hold from the decade, I would say, because we are a very strong player globally in the power sector, hard engineering sector, whether petrochemical, oil and gas. So in manufacturing sector, I feel we are very strong. So what is the problem? The problem is the self-reliant throughout the complete hydrogen value chain. So when I say complete hydrogen value chain, when we generate the hydrogen, we need electrolyzer, along with that we need BOP. So when BOP is nothing but balance of plant. So when we are talking about the balance of plant, we need many reactor vessels where basically if any moisture is there in the hydrogen, that will capture the moisture. Along with that, we need a gas liquid separator. So all depends on the fabrication, where I think we are bang on, we can do that. But when it comes to power electronics, yes, we have to depend on the foreign players. Now coming to the heart of the green hydrogen generation system, that is the electrolyzer. So in electrolyzer, if we see the conventional one, like the alkaline electrolyzer, there people use, for the bipolar plate especially, people use SS or maybe some transition metal modified, mostly nickel modified CS or MS. So fabrication of this component though we can do, but if we are talking about the advanced electrolyzer, which is like a miniaturized one, which is a compact one, which is a state-of-the-art one, which will occupy a very less space. For that we need to have a advanced engineering process. Along with that, we need a automation that can do this fabrication very fast automatically. So I feel we need to improve on that. Now coming to the more heart of the electrolyzer, like electrodes and the membrane. So even if we talk about the alkaline electrolyzer, though we can fabricate the electrodes, which is basically a Raney nickel based, which we can access on the nickel material part. But membrane that we use a polymer-based porous membrane, which we are very much dependent on the foreign players. Now let's come to the the next conventional, I would say the PEM electrolyzer. So in PEM, the electrodes are mostly made up of the platinum group metal. Those are like the iridium or the platinum, which we are completely dependent on the foreign players. Now coming to the membrane, that is more typical and hard to access, like the Nafion membranes, which is a polymer based, which we are completely dependent on maybe only two, three manufacturers globally, which is really a concern. Now the technology that we have developed, that is the anion exchange membrane electrolyzer, that basically combine the benefit of alkaline and the AM. So here currently we are using the bipolar plate that is being used alkaline, so that is making our life bit simpler. But that is not our idea. Our idea is to make the state-of-the-art, to use the state-of-the-art bipolar plate, so that we are searching the manufacturer who can help us to fabricate that. So yes, on the bipolar plate we can do by ourselves. Then coming to the electrode, that also we are fabricating in-house. In the membrane part, we are still dependent on the foreign players. And we are working in-house also to develop the membrane, and we are like halfway, I would say. So yes, on this self-reliant part, we are very much dependent on the foreign players. So I feel we should work on this part to make ourselves self-reliant. And if we see the cost part, like in cost, few countries I would not name, but yes, they reduce the cost like anything. And if we see our Western foreign countries, they can give us the advanced electrolyzer like PEM or AM, which is in a very small scale, like Anapter is a company which recently developed like 250 kilowatt that they are testing. So what I feel is we should focus more on the quality part rather than quantity will come automatically, but I feel we should focus more on quality, where the buyer can rely on the long-term stability of the electrolyzer. They can rely on the purified hydrogen, which most of the buyer need 99.99, especially in refinery. The rules are very stringent. So I think we should focus more on the quality, and that is how we can capture the broader market, I would say.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question to you is, we are seeing a lot of traction on the fertilizer side as well as on the refining side. But we are not seeing traction on the steel side, because these are the sectors which are mandated to transition. Any particular reason why steel sector is not planning to move to green hydrogen?
Yeah. So in steel, they normally use hydrogen as a reducing gas in the DRI process. So if we see the refinery sector, there are some government obligations are there, like you have to use the 10% by 2030. So there is a stage-wise implementation in the refinery to transit from by using gray hydrogen to green hydrogen. So there is some government obligations are already there, and also we are afraid of the carbon credit norms once government will apply. And I think the steel companies also, for them also it will be a concern. But what I feel is they are also working on the electric arc furnaces, which is another option for them, where of course if we see the complete value chain, they will use the grid power, but I feel that is another safe option for them. Rather than using the DRI, they can go for the electric furnaces. So that is what I think they can escape on this part.
Deepak, sir, if you can add on this.
Yeah, so actually...
What we are seeing is fertilizer, domestic, I don't see much. unless and until it is a greenfield. Fertilizer is mainly we are seeing either on the export part is what we are looking at. Refining is all domestic is what we are seeing. On the steel sector,
So actually,
lot needs to be
there
done.
are a lot of angles in steel decarbonization. So one is, as what Bharati ma'am mentioned, is what is there within the steel plant. So some players have attempted, like the larger steel companies like JSW, they did some pilot projects already, both in their Orissa as well as facility in Karnataka. But there is equally large piece for decarbonization, which is in the logistics of steel. So the entire iron ore and the carbon, the coal transportation from mines to the steel factory, and from the transport of the end finished product from the factory to this. So the entire logistics value chain also can be actually looked from decarbonization perspective. Like there are some companies in the world whom we have interacted, they're actually moving the entire iron ore, which is a bulk cargo movement from an existing vessel in which they carry to a ammonia fired vessel. So that is one way to decarbonize the iron ore logistics part of it. Likewise, there are, again in the shipping maritime decarbonization, they are talking of, passenger car carriers where the steels are getting used. So those PCC carriers and where this green steel can be used. So that can be run on greener fuels like whether it's green methanol or green ammonia. So there are many pathways within the steel industry, both within the plant and outside the plant, where the carbon footprint has to be taken care of. And also, if you go further upstream, the entire mining decarbonization. So the way the iron ores get extracted, the mining decarbonization projects has been taken up. Let's say one of the main use case that has been addressed is in Brazil. So where the green ammonia, actually the plant that is taking off from an offtake perspective, is used by the steel plants over there in the mining side. And same way, even in Western Australia, where the grids are very different versus Western versus the rest of Australia. So each of these mining giants have their own transmission grids. So in mining decarbonization which is linked to the steel sector, is also taking off some pockets of the world, yet to take off in India. But yeah, there are some use cases that are slowly and steadily emerging.
So it is more of an indirect route of transportation is what we are looking at.
So it's effectively when they talk about decarbonization, they are looking for scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. So for a steel industry, scope 1, scope 2 emissions are very high. And this is one way to address this emissions, because ultimately everything is going into their carbon accounting and their commitment to their investors and stakeholders in terms of net zero.
And what about, sir, mobility sector? Now with the government talking about they are not going to go further beyond E20. So do you see hydrogen in 2-3 years' time? The railway project has been successful, the pilot, but we do not see any further direction on that direction. So how do you see mobility sector? Because if mobility sector, you were talking about demand generation, so that is the biggest demand generation in the local market or in India market. So how do you look at that, sir?
I think mobility is tough. Here we are talking of more of a distributed value chain from a hydrogen production perspective. So I can only rely on some proven examples in the world. Like the Korea started the mobility journey on hydrogen almost 15 years back. So, and even today, all the hydrogen fuel stations, if you talk to some of them, they are still loss making, even at the EBITDA level. So, but yeah, Korea did it, and substantial part of the Korean economy, whether it's bus, whether it's long distance, even dumper vehicles, many of them, apart from the passenger cars, have moved to hydrogen economy, but it's very heavily subsidized, both from a production as well as the demand perspective. I think the biggest proven example all over in front of us is the way the hydrogen is getting deepening in China. The way the electric vehicle revolution took place in China, where almost nearly 40 to 50% of incremental sales in automobiles is in the electric vehicle segment. Same, we are seeing a very large deployment of hydrogen fuel stations across length and breadth of China. So I think there are this is some examples, we have to learn from them. But I think India has its own set of challenges. Government has a limited pool of capital which they want to incentivize and subsidize. So I think mobility in India, I think will take some time from a hydrogen perspective. Still, I think fertilizer, because the target is import substitution. So first we have this 3 million ton of ammonia which we import, that needs to be substituted. We import 100% of methanol. We have proven technology by some of the OEM manufacturers in India, along with some research institutes who have proven that a commercial vehicle can run 100% methanol fired. So can we go for green methanol as a use case? And we see there is some adoption that will happen in power sector because we are so heavily dependent on coal. So if Korea and Japan has taken power utility as a use case, can we adopt the same, especially for the larger power plants, to decarbonize them? They are already efficient in terms of adoption of a supercritical technology, but can we make them a little more efficient through the hydrogen ammonia intervention? But apart from them, I think mobility may have to wait for some more time, So electric vehicle has taken a more prominence, is what we hear in many of the government circles. And mobility, I'm here referring to the surface mobility, not the maritime or the airline route.
Thank you, sir. Kerban, you have been representing an association. So apart from refining and fertilizer, any other sectors, you see a movement in that direction?
I think why we were also focusing on refinery fertilizers because they already use grey hydrogen, so they are very low-hanging fruit. But I think broadly on this subject, what we're seeing is that the buyers of green hydrogen would be a little reluctant because we have not established a very secure pricing pipeline for what green hydrogen can look like. So as sir was saying, the offtake agreements would be beyond 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So if you're going to such long stretch of offtake agreements, knowing that the price could still fluctuate, below what you're currently signing, it kind of puts the buyer at a sort of first mover disadvantage almost. So I think that's one of the things we're seeing why there's been a little bit more reluctance to go in for such larger, longer term demand offtake agreements. But I think that it's needed that we figure out the economics around how do we reach this price parity, how do we reach this price valuation for India, and alongside keeping it globally competitive so that we have a competitive green hydrogen market as well.